Story 1. One night when I was 19 years old, I was driving back home from work late at night around 11 p.m. I was on a stretch of two-lane highway that I drive every time I go to and from work. At that particular moment, it was really dark outside and there were no other cars around me either passing the other way or approaching from behind. The highway didn't have any street lights and even the moon wasn't that bright that night. The only light for my eyes was my headlights cutting through the darkness. I had actually had a good night of work that night for whatever reason, so I was in a good mood for the drive home, listening to music and just daydreaming about stuff. I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings, and out of nowhere, I saw a flash of red appear to the right side of my car. Before I could even react and slam on the brakes, this guy in a red shirt on a bicycle swerved from the side of the road right in front of my car. I hit him directly and felt the impact on the hood of my car. I was yelling out loud and freaking out the whole time as I slowed down and pulled over. I had been going somewhere between 50 to 60 mph, and I felt like I had to have killed the guy. It would be a miracle if I somehow didn't. I got out of the car and ran back down the road to see how badly he was hurt. The only thing is, I didn't see him. I couldn't find the guy, his bike, his red shirt, or anything that seemed like it belonged to a biker scattered on the side of the road. I began searching the ditch on the side of the road with a flashlight, hoping to find him alive. Maybe I had just clipped him. A few people passed by slowly on the road while I was looking in the field for a body, and eventually a sheriff's car pulled up behind me. I told the sheriff what happened and how this guy just came out of nowhere. Before I could finish my continued rambling and crying, the sheriff calmed me down and told me that I didn't hit anyone. The sheriff continued on to tell me that about 15 years ago, a young man in a red shirt was hit by a car while riding his bike right there on that spot on the highway. He died instantly, and the sheriff said that every couple of years they get a call about someone driving on the highway who believes they've hit a red-shirted biker. It was the most relieving thing in my life to hear that I had hit a ghost. It had felt so real, though. I felt an impact when I collided with it. But sure enough, when I got back to my car, there was no dent, scratches, or blood on my hood. I still drive on that road to and from work every day, and now just instinctively slow down on that part of the highway, wondering if I will ever see the ghost bike rider again. The sheriff said that the station only received calls about the paranormal accident once in a rare while, and I wonder if it was a sign for me to slow down or be more observant when I'm driving. Story 2. About 8 years ago, I was driving across the Colorado and New Mexico border at around 4 a.m. I needed gas if I was going to make it through the rest of the morning. I was looking for a stop to fill up, but there wasn't much, and a couple of other places were closed. I happened to come across a tiny little farm town with not much at all. They did have a little gas station, and it might be the only place I find for miles, so I decided to stop and fill up there. I hadn't seen another car for hours, and it was freezing cold outside, so I didn't expect to see anybody else there at the gas station. As far as I could tell, the town felt abandoned. It was that quiet outside. It was a surreal feeling, honestly, except for the fact that it was cold outside. I started pumping my gas, certain that I was completely alone, until I noticed another car in the shadows near the back of the building. It was a nice-looking black lowrider with completely tinted windows. I noticed 4 very gangster-looking Latino guys leaning against it. I remember laughing out loud a bit at first, not just because I had no idea they were there, but also because they were wearing all black shorts, wife-beater tank tops, and knee-high socks. It was just a funny picture because of their outfits and how cold it was outside. They were just posted up against their car in the middle of nowhere at 4 a.m. looking so casual. Suddenly, without a word, all four of them got off the car and walked straight towards me. Now, under the lights of the gas station, I could see the full sleeves and face tattoos, and I realized that I probably shouldn't have laughed. Dropping the gas pump, I quickly got into my car and accelerated the quickest I probably ever have out of that gas station. Less than 30 seconds after I pulled out onto the highway, I saw headlights swerve out and follow me. Thankfully, I had some upgrades on my car and engine, and after a few miles I was able to lose them as their headlights disappeared in my rearview mirror. I didn't think much of it and even laughed at how bad I outran them until a cop buddy of mine told me about the Mexican cartels running drugs through there to avoid the interstate. I'm guessing they would have left me alone if I never saw them in the shadows by the gas station or acknowledged them. But it was still a scary situation in the middle of nowhere that late at night. Story 3. The most disturbing thing that's ever happened to me was on a long drive back to college for my last semester before graduation. I'm a night person, and I was leaving kind of late for the drive, but was expecting to get in around midnight since I was going to be living on my own after school. I was feeling a bit sentimental, as it felt like I was leaving home for the last time. As the sun set while I was driving towards the highway, there was a beautiful low fog in the fields along the road, catching the light. I decided that it'd be nice to try a more scenic back road route than the normal boring interstate that I usually took, so I decided to cut it off before the highway and take a scenic route towards West Virginia. The last human contact I made for that night was when I stopped at a diner for dinner. I filled up on gas and proceeded towards West Virginia as night fell. The fog ended up getting thicker, and it was really hard to see through once it got dark. There are some small towns that I would pass through, but for a Friday night it was oddly empty. At each town I went through, it was only 10 p.m., but all the local bars looked closed and there were no lights on in any of the houses. It was strange, but I had never driven this way before, and maybe that's normal for those towns. Anyway, I was making slow progress with the fog on the back roads at night, worrying about hitting a deer. Around 12 a.m. I got to a large national forest and had to stop to pee. There was no other traffic around, so I left the engine running, expecting it to just be a quick stop. As I came around the car, undoing my belt, I heard voices maybe 40 or 50 yards into the forest, followed by a scrambling through the dead leaves and brush coming in my direction. It was pitch black out, so I couldn't see anything and I didn't know what was going on, but I was freaked out and did not want to find out more about the void voices and the noises. I bolted back to the driver's side of my car and sped away down the road, happy that I had left the car running. A little while later, I was heading up towards some mountains and nearing a scenic overlook for an old fire watchtower. I pulled into the overlook to actually pee this time, as I never got a chance to earlier. I was at the top of a mountain and finally got cell service for the first time in a couple of hours. I checked my phone to see a string of concerned texts and calls from my mom, freaking out and asking if I had made it okay. By this time, I should have been back at college hours ago if I hadn't taken the detour. Story 4. One fall night, I was driving back home from a friend's house right before midnight. The highway I was driving on stretched out before me for miles, dark and empty. I'd been driving for about an hour when suddenly, at the edge of my high beams, a bunch of things blocked the entire road as they walked across. I would have guessed it to be a herd of animals, but as I approached a little bit closer to get a better look, my headlights illuminated a cluster of figures crossing the road. It was so strange. In the middle of nowhere, miles away from any town or even a gas station, there was a large group of people crossing the road together, maybe about 20 of them, seemingly unaware of my presence. It was so strange, though, because they were all dressed in dark clothing, and I couldn't make out any faces since they were covered by hoods. Not a single person looked towards my car. The way they walked was even weirder, as they all had an odd, clunky-looking gait, and they were very spaced out, with nobody standing really that near each other. It was very unsettling. I slowed down to stop and waited for the last of the group to finish crossing the highway. I glanced out my windows and into the rearview mirror to see if I was being set up for a robbery or something else, but there was nothing that I could see around me, just darkness as the group continued to cross. I even rolled my window down a bit to see if I could hear anything, but I heard nothing. No one spoke or made any sort of noise, and in the whole walk across, not even one of them acknowledged that I was there or looked my way. They just moved as a unit, sort of shuffling across the highway until disappearing into the woods on the other side. I had no idea how to process what I had just seen, but I kept driving and hoped that there was a logical explanation to the sighting I had just witnessed, even though I couldn't think of one. About 10 minutes later, as I was continuing down the road, I finally saw another car, which was a relief after how nervous I was feeling. As the car passed me, I noticed the driver looking my way with an expression of either confusion or fear. I wondered why in the world they would look at me like that, but I soon found out why. I watched in the rearview mirror as they slowed down, almost stopping, before speeding off into the night behind me. Illuminated just a bit by the moonlight, I once again saw a group of figures had emerged from the side of the highway and begun crossing. That's what the other driver had seen when I thought they were looking at me. It was another group of figures like I had seen, about 20 of them walking in that same fashion across the road. There was no way it could have been the same group I just saw 10 minutes earlier down the road. That was by far the creepiest and most unexplainable thing I have ever seen while driving. Story 5. It was late one night, and I was driving home after a long shift at work. The sun was setting, leaving the highway dim and quiet. I was almost halfway home when I noticed something strange in my peripheral vision as I approached a bend in the road. I caught a glimpse of a figure standing by the side of the highway. It was a woman, or at least it looked like one. She was wearing a long white dress, her hair hanging over her face. I slowed down, unsure of what to do, thinking maybe she needed help, even if it was kind of odd for her to be out at this time of the day. I pulled over a few yards ahead. I glanced in the mirror and saw her still standing there, not moving. I hesitated, but finally decided to get out of the car and check on her. Maybe she really did need help. As I approached, I called out, "Are you okay?" But I got no response. I felt a chill creep through me and something felt off. Just then I heard the faint sound of a car engine behind me. I turned around to see another vehicle approaching. I thought maybe it was a good thing to have another person here to help the woman, but as the headlight swept across the road, I felt an icy dread wash over me. The woman was gone. One moment she was there, and the next she had vanished into thin air. I felt like I had just got myself into a very bad situation. I turned back towards my car, hoping to get away before anything else happened. The car pulled up beside me, though, and through the rolled-down window, a man spoke to me, asking what I was doing there. He actually seemed really nice and asked me if I was having car trouble. I told him I was all right and thought I saw somebody else who might have needed help. He pointed towards the direction I had just come from, saying, "You saw her, didn't you? The woman in white." She's always here," he continued, shrugging. "She just appears and disappears sometimes, trying to get people to stop, and other times just watching." After making sure that I didn't need anything, the man was on his way down the road, and so was I. After getting back to my car, the image of her face hidden behind her hair stayed with me, though.